Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, Dr. Omer Atilla Ergi.
Alaikum salam. How are you, Dr. Suleha?
Good. Alhamdulillah. I have a question for you that gets commonly asked, and that is, if Allah knows whether we're going to heaven or hell, Jannah or Jahannam, then why are we being tested? So there's this assumption that if we're being tested, the outcome is not known to anyone.
Yes.
I guess, our worldly life gives us that kind of thinking. So how can we reconcile these two? Allah knows and where we're going to be. He knows where everyone's going to end up, right?
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes.
But we're also being tested to see where we don't know where we will be.
Yes.
So how do we reconcile this?
What's the reason for testing then, since Allah knows everything?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. He could have just put us in there.
I think this is directly related to the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As you know, one of the subuti sifats, which are the affirmative attributes of Allah, is ilm. And his name corresponding with that is Al-Alim. So he is the all-knowing, omniscient. There's nothing can escape his knowledge, according to Islamic theology anyway. So obviously he knows. He knows where people will go to. In fact, he knows where people are right now.
So he knows everything, right?
He knows everything.
Yes.
But maybe to get a better understanding of this knowledge, it's good to cite some analogies or things from science as well, because so people can get a better picture of it. What the astrophysicists resemble the universe is like space-time continuum. That's the term that they use. But I usually use this analogy of a loaf of bread. You know how there's a loaf of bread with slices.
Yes.
So every slice of that bread represents space-time at a specific time. So each loaf is space-time at a different time. Because as you know, since the Big Bang, the universe keeps on expanding.
Yes.
And we can imagine, the slices are increasing as the universe expands bigger. And maybe you can say that each slice is bigger than the previous one, because it keeps on growing.
It's like a pyramid, let's say, and you're cutting it and it's getting bigger and bigger.
Bigger and bigger. And maybe, I think a mathematician called Herman Minkowski, he came up with this model. He said that the universe is like an onion,
Right.
It resembles an onion.
Layers and layers.
Layers and layers and layers. It keeps on growing, the expansion and the innermost layer it describes as the Big Bang. That's when it's all started. And then as space-time keeps on growing, he says that new layer occurs, new layer comes into existence. From like the loaf of bread example, maybe I could say from a human perspective, because we are living in the current time.
Right.
We can say we are in the outermost layer from our perspective, because it
In our own lives.
in our own lives, because it's the present. We consider it as present.
Yeah, and the other slices would be our past.
Our past. But those slices are still there.
Yeah.
Because we know this through astronomy, because when we look at distant stars, we see the past. We actually see the previous slices. Because let us say, if we look at a star that is about 2,000 light years away, we are actually looking at 2,000 years ago. So we are seeing the past. So the slices are there, past slices are there. However, I make an addition to this analogy, and I say the future slices are there as well. Because we are trapped in the current present time. For us, they don't exist. However, from Allah's perspective, since His knowledge is infinite and all-encompassing, then the future slices are there as well. So this is the reason why He sees all slices of space-time at the same instant. And He creates them as well, of course. He's the creator of all the slices. So He has this all-encompassing knowledge, including that goes all the way to Jannah, Jahannam, Akhirah, all of these things. So yes, indeed, He knows who will go to Jannah, who will go to Jahannam. Nothing can escape His knowledge. But here's the tricky bit, Allah knowing does not mean we know. Like as you mentioned at the beginning as well, we don't know.
We don't know.
We
And
don't know. Yeah.
I guess bigger question, Allah knowing, does it compel us to do what he knows?
Yes, it doesn't really compel us because, as you know, Allah's knowledge does not negate free will, human free will, because He knows what we'll decide, but we make the decision at the end of the day. So it doesn't really negate free will. But the important thing here is because this life is a testing from our perspective, Islamic theological perspective, we need to go through this test to know about ourselves. It is not something for Allah to know. So Allah already knows, as we said, God is all knowledgeable, but we don't know. We don't know, and we need to be put through this test. Once I got asked this question by a student, a university student, some years ago, and this student said, I asked this to different sheikhs and imams, they couldn't answer, So what do you think, how can you satisfy me with an answer? I said to him, think about this. If a God, because he already knows that who is going to go to Jannah and Jahannam, if, for argument's sake, he created Ahiret straight away without going through this test on earth, and on that day of judgment, we say, he said to Abu Jahl, for example, you're going to hell. And he said to Abu Bakr, you're going to heaven. Wouldn't Abu Jahl say, what did I do to deserve this?
Absolutely.
If Allah said...
no evidence.
There's no evidence.
For that person, for Allah in his
For
knowledge.
Allah, He knows.
But for that person, there's no evidence that I haven't done all this. There's no...
Yes.
Yeah.
Even if Allah said, look, I know you are going to be like this, that person will say, but Ya Rabbi, Almighty Allah, you didn't give me a chance to prove myself. He would say that. It is just like a teacher in a school. Just imagine a scenario like a teacher has, let us say, 20 students in class, and he says, you don't need to come, or she says, you don't need to come to class at all. At the end of the year, just come and pick up your thing, the results. And they all come at the end of the year. They start looking at the results. It says, Ahmed, 90 out of 100. Hassan, for example, you failed 10 out of 100. Isn't Hassan going to say, this is not fair? You never taught us anything. You didn't give us a chance to, work on this. You didn't give us a chance to go through the assignments and things like that, tests, And then you're saying that, I failed, he passed. And, the teacher would not say, oh, I know you were going to fail anyway. And even if the teacher did, even if the teacher has that type of knowledge, Hassan is going to say, you never gave me a chance. It's nothing to do with whether you know or not. It is you giving me a chance,
So there seems to be two aspects to it. Like even with the analogy you gave, it's about us learning about ourselves or learning about even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through our life journey. So would you say that that's also an important part of this discussion? Because it's not just about heaven or hell, it's really about a journey, isn't it?
Yes, I think that's a very good point, because human beings were sent to this world so that they can develop themselves. That's one of the most important things. That's why we have given this unique gift of intellect, but also we have a soul. The Quran says, we are created in the best of patterns. لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. That doesn't mean only our physical appearance. It includes our consciousness. It includes our intellect, our free will, that we mentioned. It includes our spirituality. And these areas, we come as a raw material to this world, and we need to develop them to attain higher and higher levels. If we are not put through these tests, how are we going to achieve those levels and, get maybe the proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And without testing, classifying people as bad or good, this one's suitable for hell, this one's suitable for heaven, is not fair. And Allah is all adl, and He is just. And that's the reason he puts us through this life so we can, both intellectually and spiritually develop ourselves. That makes more sense.
This reminds me, I guess, of another point. So in this life, there is that growth, there is that development, like you mentioned. So kind of also, I think about those who didn't, let's say, pass the test or who didn't spiritually grow, intellectually grow as much as they should have. It's almost like, that then has to happen in the afterlife. Like that, in the afterlife where there's that cleansing, purification has to happen in the afterlife.
Yes,
yes. And, if they haven't done it in this life. So ultimately, it's almost like every soul has to go through that journey. And ideally, it's better to have those tests and challenges and pass them here.
Of course. Like, again, to cite an example from the world of academia, nobody is going to give someone a diploma, degree, or master's or PhD, especially on topics like, being a lawyer or doctor, without going through that, the studying and testing. That they can't say, look, I knew this person was going to get his or her PhD anyway. So there you go. Nobody does that. Life is not like that. We witness how life is. So that development, that knowledge accumulation is needed here as well. And it's needed for life after death as well, for the day of judgment as well. But some people might say not everyone has the same capability, not ability. But God evaluates people according to their capabilities. If there is a shoulder that can carry 100 kilos, God will place 100 kilos on that shoulder. But if the shoulders are weak, 20 kilos, God will place that much burden on that shoulder. But if a person, who can carry 100 kilos, only carries 10 kilos, that person will be asked about that.
That's true. Because in the Quran, Allah says, I will not burden a soul more than what they can bear. Yes. So definitely, I guess, and an important part of that, I noticed you talking about it, it's like it's about being in the present. So rather than thinking about the past and all the problems you've gone through and thinking about the potential future problems, which is common. Like often when people think about the past experiences, the negative experiences, it can lead to depression. And if they think a lot about the future possibilities, it can lead to anxiety because it's like, oh, what if this happens? What if that goes wrong? And that can be exhausting for the present. So I think a key part of understanding that Allah doesn't test a person with more than what they can, doesn't burden them with more than what they can bear. We have to think about using our energy in the present.
Yeah, because patience is given to human beings for a reason. We call that sabr. But it can be misused, like you say. If you divide it into the past, the future, there's not enough left for the present. And some people do that and they get affected psychologically. And as they say, shaitan can attack human beings from different sides. Shaitan can attack you from the past. They're making you worried about what happened in the past. Shaitan can attack you with the future. Being concerned about the future. From the left is generally shaitan attacks with things like, encouraging you to do, unlawful things, harams and things like that. And from the right, shaitan can attack you with religious things. Oh, you're doing this really good, you're perfect, you're better than others, getting you that way as well. So I think, as Bediüzzaman Said Nursi says, you should use what is given to you. Those are wonderful gifts that Allah has given to us for the present. Use them for the present. Don't, waste them for the past, present, and things like that. That's a good thing, and yeah. I think that's a good thing.
Otherwise it can be exhausting. Another thing, talking about choosing and tests and decision making, quite a few contemporary writers talk about how we focus I want to see your thoughts on this. We focus too much on willpower, especially in the Atomic Habits book. This is pointed out, where he says willpower is overrated, in that what he means by that is, of course, we have willpower. We believe in Islamically that we do. But for example, if I've bought chocolate and put them here, and then I have to tell myself to resist eating it, he says, just don't bring chocolate. So don't tempt yourself.
Mhm.
So it's almost like there's this, maybe this applies to tests to some degree as well. Is it our approach and our strategies just as important as our willpower and our faith? What are your thoughts?
Yes. Look, whether you bring the chocolate or not, at the end of the day, it is still your willpower to buy that. That's another thing too, because if it's in your mind, you bought it, you're going to put it in the house, you're eventually going to eat it anyway. That's a different topic, like, for example, the Quran, when it talks about adultery, it says la taqrabu zina. It doesn't say don't commit adultery. It says don't approach it, because human beings have that weak side as well, the nafs. So don't approach it. That's what the Quran says. I think it is overrated. Willpower is overrated because from an Islamic perspective, our will is nothing but an inclination. It's just an inclination because Allah creates even our decisions, our actions, sorry. We make the decision, which is called kasb, intention, and then creation of the action. Intention comes from us. That's why we are responsible, just because we are making that intention. But it's Allah who creates everything.
I guess that's an important point you highlighted, because we don't have creative powers.
We don't have creative powers.
Is that why you mentioned that point? Yeah.
So will is very limited. That's why we call it irade-i cüz'iye, the minor will. I think it is very, very limited, to be honest. But we do have it, and it's very powerful as well. You got to get that balance. Because again, Bediüzzaman Said Nursi says, why is will important? He says that 20 people can build a house in 20 days. But one person can burn it down in 20 minutes. From a negative perspective, it is powerful because it can cause big damage, destructive. However, we shouldn't get, arrogant with this as well. Oh, I got so much willpower and things like that, because everything given to us is given by Allah. We have no reason to brag about our, successes and things that we achieve, things like that, because it doesn't belong to us. It was him. We only made a little effort, and he opens our path. And sometimes very intelligent people, never get to certain places.
Yeah.
Sometimes people, very low IQs, they become billionaires.
Yeah.
We see in history and in today's as well.
That's true. So we should use our willpower, but never fully rely. I guess not be humble about it. Maybe that's the best way about it. Be humble about it, modest about it. And I think another point we touched on a bit earlier is, some people, depending on I feel like circumstances, Allah will test them accordingly, or He will expect maybe. For example, if you have a 2-year-old or a child in year 2 and you have a child in year 5, when you test them, you don't give them the same test.
Yes, of course.
Because if someone's in year 5, you would be testing them at a higher level.
Yes.
And so I feel that, just because some people might say, well, I didn't have the opportunity to learn, or I didn't have my environment was really bad.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on that?
You are tested according to your abilities. As I said, for example, a university teacher don't go into a classroom full of, primary school students and start talking about, Einstein's equations, Max Planck's equation. They're not going to understand it. So he or she teaches them according to their level, and they are responsible of that level.
Yeah.
So human beings are like that. We might have different capacities, capabilities, and Allah will test us according to those capabilities. If a person has a lesser capability, but that person might be pushing it to the limits, they might get a higher level on the other side. So it is not about whether you are more intelligent, more powerful, you have more money. These are insignificant in regards to that. And that's why we have the component of du'a as well there.
Mm-hmm.
Du'a is amazing because the Quran says, ask and I shall answer. And I think...
How do you feel that fits in with the testing aspect, or more to do with possibilities?
The possibilities are there, but Allah is saying you should ask for it.
Ask for
but
it.
Sometimes people say, I do ask for it, but it doesn't happen.
Yes, that's a very common question.
Why isn't my du'ās answered?
Yeah, so how do you respond to that?
Well, maybe the best response to that is this from an Islamic, again, theological perspective. Allah answers du'ās in different ways because the Quran says He does answer all of them. Whoever makes du'a, supplication, prayer, Allah will accept it or answer it, I should say. But it'll be answered in different ways. Sometimes it'll be answered exactly the way you want it, because that's probably more blessing for you. It's better for you. But sometimes Allah gives you something better than what you ask for. That happens too. Sometimes Allah does not give you what you want at all because you don't need it. Because we don't know the hikmah, the wisdom of our future. We ask for something, it may be bad for us as well. But think about this, analogy again. A person goes to a doctor and says, I got this illness, and the doctor says, I'll check it, I'll treat it. But the person says, well, I want this medicine here. Look, if the medicine the sick patient is requesting is really beneficial to them, doctor might, prescribe it. But the doctor might say, that's not the best for you. I'll give you this medicine, something better. Or after checking the person up, the doctor might say, you don't need any medicine. But they can't insist, no, I want this one, I want this one. That's the expert there, not you. So in regards to dua, maybe we can enlighten that analogy.
And I think what's powerful about dua, on top of the analogy really helps to explain it, is dua is an act of worship. So even if you don't get what you ask for because Allah deems it not suitable for you based on His wisdom, He's going to reward you for actually doing that, undertaking that act of worship.
That's a very good point.
So you never lose.
I had that in mind. Thank you for reminding me about that as well. Actually, there is a narration about that. And this person, he kept on making du'ās in his life that they never happened, they never realized. And he passed away. And on the Day of Judgment, he had more sins than good deeds. And he said, look, I'm going to end up in Jahannam first. It's evident. But he was a believer. And then when they were doing this, the mizan, they're putting things on there, the scales. And he realized that they're bringing something onto the right side and it keeps on getting heavier and heavier, the deed side. And he was shocked. He said, I never did these things, Ya Rabbi, why is it much heavier there? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, look, these are all the du'ās you made on earth. I didn't give them there. I reserved them for here. Now I'm rewarding you with those du'ās now. So this is the reality of making du'a. Like you said, it is a type of worship. Du'a is worship. It doesn't mean it will be always materialize what you ask for, but you are getting the rewards of that, worship. It is like, doing a prayer for rain. It's famous. They make du'a for rain. Making du'a for rain, it's not to make it rain. Some people get confused like that. It means that is the time of that du'a. If there is long time there's no rain, it's specified that the time of that worship has come. But some people think that, we do a rain dance, like they used to do, and it makes it rain. No, that's not the aim, really.
Yeah.
You do the worship, and the result is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes.
That's a very important point as well. I guess just to wrap it up, coming back to the idea of, Allah tests us, and there's an ultimate final destination for all of us. I don't know if it's even too big to go into it now, but people will say, why did Allah feel the need to test us in the first place? Like, why did He create us to test us? So you can see how some of these questions, theological questions, one leads to another. And that's why I do think it's important for people to have an all-rounded knowledge, because one leads to another, We went from qadar to test to afterlife, and now is purpose of existence.
Yes. Look, they are not just theological but philosophical questions too. Maybe it is a big topic. Maybe in another episode, maybe we can get into that as well. Of course, Allah doesn't need anything. The reality is, it is us who needs them. But, maybe one example I should give about that, when we dig for raw materials, well, let us say we're looking for gold or diamonds or whatever, they don't come out as pure gold or pure diamond when you take it out. It's just a raw material there, and then they are processed. And then we get the diamond out, or other valuable jewels, from their metals and things like that. And what is left over is coal, or what do we do with that? We burn it. So I think that's the way human beings are, in essence. They are like a raw material. They need to be processed so the diamond in them could come out, the gold in them could come out. That's the reason that Allah puts us through this test. He doesn't need it. I think we need it.
We need it, and we get so much out of it. He chose to do it. He didn't need to. He chose to create us, and we get a lot out of seeing ourselves grow. It's probably one of the most, good feelings as you find you're learning new things or developing new skills. There's a reason why Allah put that, I think, positive feeling in us when we do achieve certain things.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Omer Atilla, for another very interesting and valuable podcast. See you next time.
See you.
Assalamu alaikum.